Welcome, sundry readers! I hope you enjoy today's story. Please remember to like and subscribe. It really helps me out. Happy listening! An Old-Fashioned Thanksgiving by Louisa May Alcott. Illustrated by Bernardin. Many years ago, up among the New Hampshire hills lived Farmer Bassett and his wife and their sons and daughters. They were poor in money, but rich in land and love. November had come and the crops were in. The walls of the cheerful kitchen were hung with garlands of dried apples, onions, and corn. Up aloft from the beams shone crook-neck squashes, juicy hams, and dried venison. Mrs. Bassett bustled to and fro, flushed and flowery, for today was Thanksgiving. Tilly, the oldest daughter, was briskly grinding spices as Pru kept time with the chopper. The twins, Roxy and Rhodey, sliced away at the apples while Seth and Solomon shelled corn for popping. "Here's a man coming up the hill lively," shouted Solomon, looking out the window. It was old Mr. Chadwick, who had come to tell Mrs. Bassett that her mother was very ill and she'd better come quickly. "Your pa and I must go right off," said Mrs. Bassett, her head in a sad jumble of anxiety, turkey, sorrow, and haste. "I'm dreadfully sorry about Thanksgiving dinner, my dears." The children ran about getting their mother and father ready for the long drive. By the time Mr. Bassett drove the old green sleigh to the door, Mrs. Bassett was waiting. "Tilly, have the baked beans and pudding for dinner. I shall come back the minute I can. Pa will come back this afternoon, so keep snug and be good." "Yes'm. Goodbye, goodbye," called the children as Mr. and Mrs. Bassett drove away. As soon as they were out of sight, Tilly rolled up her sleeves. "Now, about Thanksgiving dinner," she began. "Ma doesn't expect us to have a real Thanksgiving dinner," said Pru. "We don't know how to make it." "I'm sure I can roast a turkey and make a pudding as well as anybody. The pies are all ready, and if we can't boil vegetables, we don't deserve any dinner," cried Tilly. "Did you ever roast a turkey?" asked Roxy. "Should you dare to try?" said Rhodey in an awestruck tone. "Don't you want to have roast turkey, pudding, and apple slump for dinner?" The children all gazed at Tilly with round eyes, nodding hopefully. "Then all you have to do is keep out of the way and let Pru and me work," said Tilly firmly. Happily banished from the kitchen, the younger children gathered up their mittens and overcoats and headed to the old mill to go sledding in the crisp new snow. Tilly and Pru put on their largest aprons and set out all the spoons, dishes, pots, and pans they could find. "Now we'll have dinner at 5. Pa will be back by that time, and he'll be surprised to find us all ready with a Thanksgiving feast," said Tilly. As she attacked the plum pudding, Tilly felt sure it would turn out right, for she had seen her mother do it many times. But she forgot both sugar and salt, and she tied the pudding in the cloth so tightly that it had no room to swell. Happily unaware of these mistakes, Tilly popped the pudding into the pot. "I can't remember what flavoring Ma puts into the stuffing," she said next. "It's either sweet marjoram or summer savory. We'll put both in, and then we'll be sure to be right. Pru, run and get some from the garret while I mash the bread." Away trotted Pru, but the garret was dark, and in her haste she got catnip and wormwood. "It doesn't smell right, but I suppose it will when it's cooked," said Tilly. She filled the turkey with the stuffing, sewed it up, and set it to roast over the fire. Soon all was cooking and the girls set the table. With red and white china, pewter platters, and mugs and spoons to match, it looked properly dressed for the occasion. The younger children trooped in just in time, hungry from their day of playing outdoors. "Doesn't it look nice?" said Pru. As they admired the festive table, Tilly sniffed the air and ran over to the fireplace. "My sakes alive!" cried Tilly. The turkey is burned on one side and the kettles have boiled over." They were just struggling to get the turkey out of the fire when Roxy called, "Here's Pa." "There's folks with him," added Rhodey. "2 big sleighs, chock full." In came Pa, Ma, Aunt, Uncle, and cousins, and even Grandma, all in great spirits and all very surprised to find such a festive feast. "Hurrah! Grandma's here!" cried Pru. "It was all a mistake of old Mr. Chadwick's. He got the message wrong. Grandma was sitting up as cheery as you please," said Mrs. Bassett. "Your pa fetched us all up to spend the night, and we are going to have a jolly time of it to judge by the look of things," said Aunt Cynthia. They all sat down to enjoy the meal, and Mrs. Bassett praised Tilly and Pru for their hard work. But when the eating began, their pride got a fall, for Mrs. Bassett nearly choked when she tasted the stuffing. "Tilly Bassett, whatever made you put wormwood and catnip in your stuffing?" demanded Mrs. Bassett, trying not to be severe, for all the rest were laughing, and Tilly looked ready to cry. "It didn't do a mite of harm, for the turkey's delicious," declared Pa. "All the vegetables are well done, and the dinner is a credit to you, my dears," declared Aunt Cynthia with a mouthful of food. The plum pudding turned out heavy as lead and as hard as a cannonball, but it was speedily whisked out of sight, and everyone announced that the apple slump was perfect. After the table was cleared, Uncle Mose struck up his fiddle, and everyone fell into place for a dance. All down the long kitchen they danced, and even Grandma joined in the fun. Apples and cider finished the evening, and after hugs and kisses all around, the guests drove away in the clear moonlight. As they watched the sleighs disappear, Mrs. Bassett gathered her family around. "Children, we have special cause to be thankful on this day. Grandma is well, our dinner was plentiful, and we are all together," she said. When the good nights were over and the children in bed, silence reigned, broken only by an occasional snore from the boys and the soft scurry of mice in the buttery taking their part in this old-fashioned Thanksgiving. The end.